There's something wrong with my eyes, or am I not understanding what I'm reading? I had that happen to me today when I opened up the Daily Telegraph and read this from James O'Doherty. Australia risks invasion from hostile foreign powers unless our population keeps growing, according to the New South Wales Liberal leader Mark Speakman. The opposition leader's calls were immediately rejected as insanity by one economist who warned a population boom would lead to more dodgy developments. It was also dismissed as nonsense by former Premier Bob Carr. Mr Speakman says without significant population growth, we risk not being able to securely maintain occupation of Australia. The businessman and philanthropist Dick Smith is joining us on the line because he's always been passionate about population. Dick, good morning.
Good morning. Good to talk to you, Ben.
Apparently we're at risk of invasion.
No, that's ridiculous. I did a major documentary on population for the ABC, and we interviewed Major General Peter Cosgrove, and no one would have better expertise than him about invasion, number of people. And he said, no, utterly ridiculous. He said, you don't defend a country by having someone standing every metre on the beach. He said, you just need really smart munitions and actions and things like that. It's not more people.
Is it the craziest argument you've ever heard for a bigger population?
Yeah, it is probably the craziest, but the argument I hear most of all, and it comes from the billionaires, and it's all about greed, is they want more money, and the only way they can get more money is by having more people. Ben, let me just give you, I worked out a few figures. Our population growth rate this year will be 2.2%. Now, that's highest in the OECD countries, and that 2.2%, if we keep it up, will give us 50 million people in 25 years, and wait for it, at the end of this century, when our grandkids will still be alive, we'll have 157 million people. Now, no one thinks 157 million is possible for a country like Australia. So one day we'll have to stop growing. We should actually start doing it now, not later.
So based on the 2.2% growth at the moment, it would be 50 million in 25 years, 157 million people in Australia by the end of the century.
That's exactly what the figures show. So it shows you can't possibly keep growing for a start. We're about our optimum population size now. To grow the population, all that will happen is the wealthier will get wealthier, but typical Australian working families won't be able to afford a house at all, and they won't be able to afford lots of other things.
Dick, I'm sure that those in charge would say that we turned off the migration tap during coronavirus, so we're making up the lost numbers.
Yeah, that's not really so. By the way, the immigration last year, 450,000, that's more than the total population of Canberra, which is 395,000. So we're bringing in more than one Canberra every year. We're not, of course, building the infrastructure, but my biggest problem is the fact that when I was young, Pip and I, we bought a house in Sydney that in 1972 for $30,000, and that was about... Well, in fact, to do the same house today would be 6 times less affordable. Now, politicians will tell you that each generation should be better off, not worse off, but we've now made it impossible for a young couple to buy a house with a backyard for the kids to play.
Dick, you know that people have stopped even talking about it. Young people have stopped even having that conversation about whether or not they'll be able to buy. So many people have now just put a line through the whole concept.
And that's absolutely terrible. I mean, one of the fantastic things about Australia is our big open spaces and the fact that you can own your own house. It's the dream of every young couple. When I was about 18 years of age, I put in my diary I wanted to buy a block of land. And in those days, a block of land in Sydney was about $2,000, and I was looking around to put a deposit on a block of land. Now, there's just no way you can do that.
Dick, and are you well? Everything going okay in your world?
Yeah, everything's going okay. I went flying a couple of days ago in the helicopter over Sydney Harbour, and it's beautiful.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for talking to us.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ben.
Good on you. Dick Smith, the Australian businessman, entrepreneur and philanthropist. And I just can't quite work out what Mark Speakman is on. The quote from Mark Speakman in the Daily Telegraph, when you've got maybe half the world's population in the continent next to us, and when there are incredible strains on the resources in those countries, when you could have climate change potentially displacing hundreds of millions of people in the next decades, I don't think Australia credibly can secure occupation of a continent without some population growth. As Alan says on the text line, ask Mark Speakman how he thinks a big Australia will defend itself against a big invader. Rally the masses down to the beaches, armed with pitchforks.